Hello everybody, welcome back. I am Kate Rebel. This is Kate Rebel's Realm, and thank you so much for joining in to do the Star Piercers. I am very excited to read Nyx's story. That one I am very jazzed about, and I hope you've been enjoying all the legendary lore that I have been providing. I am pretty excited to be getting close to wrapping up all of the stories and getting into some gameplay, some summoning, some other things with the game. I know you guys have been asking about it, so I'm pretty excited for that as well. But since we are here, let's get into the Star Piercers. This is part 1. Now, we've already done Alora's story in the Watchguard, so we're doing Razzak, the Driftwood Impaler, a loyal member of Captain Reeves' crew who wields a spear that deals massive damage to enemies. I really like him. He throws bubbles out. He's cool. The Driftwood Impaler. He answers to Reeve and Reeve alone. Cut the tongue of the last man to question him, so you'd be best steer clear. Quartermaster aboard Captain Reeves' ship. I'm not gonna lie though, that skull that's on his shoulders kind of looks like him. So he's not opposed to killing anybody, even of his own kind. He now resides on one of the most dreaded ships prowling Taya's oceans. Life above the sea was never deemed desirable for Razzak, the Driftwood Impaler. Sustained by a bottomless desire for revenge, Razzak's hurtling spear has been the last projectile viewed by countless marauders and seafarers alike, milliseconds before it splits their skulls in two. An unfathomably ancient creature, Razzak spent scores of peaceful centuries residing blissfully in his seafloor village, where he was deeply revered for his wisdom and counsel. While those of his kind are able to hold their breath for hours in the open air, life was idyllic enough to remain incessantly beneath the waves. When shadows from great ships were first cast upon the sea floor, Razzak and his kind were more curious than troubled. What barbarism could have possibly come from land dwellers exploring the beauty of Taya's open waters? To this day, he ritually punishes himself for this naivete, for it wasn't long before the seas were overfished, overcrowded, and filled with acrid toxins that burn the throats and eyes of every aquatic being. When Razzak and his kind attempted to rebel against the defilement of their home, a whaling ship sent an explosive substance to the seafloor, capable of detonating underwater. All he'd ever known disintegrated before his eyes. With his father's hunting spear able to be recalled mentally after each launch, Razzak burst through the surface of the sea, slaughtering the entire crew that stole his world before setting his sights on other unsuspecting ships. Word of his brutality reached the infamous Captain Reeve, who recruited Razzak after promising him as many souls as his spear could claim. Not at first enamored with the idea of dwelling aboard a ship, Razzak was sold on a life of piracy when it became clear he could use it to enforce justice and protection for those of the depths. It's quite difficult to say what's more foreboding to see flying in one's direction, Captain Reeve's sails or Razzak's jagged spear. I'd be so much more concerned about the crazy bubbles that he blows at people. What are you talking about? Pelagios, the furious Torrent. The sea may seem safe for now, but only a fool would ignore the darkness encroaching on our shores. Report from Mari, daughter of the tides. While most surface dwellers spare a few thoughts for the kingdoms sprawling under the seas, the same cannot be said for the aquatic neighbors. Though largely spared the deleterious effects of the spread of darkness through Taya, the Oceanides are all too aware that their domains could fall next. Spurred by the fall of Acadia, Pelagios, the furious Torrent, has bartered his very soul to build an army capable of protecting his home. There was a time when lawless pirates ruled the seas of the south of Taya. They stole crucial and valuable shipments, destroyed ships unable to afford safe passage, and stole riches and young alike from the Oceanides that resided below the waves. A young Pelagios lost his own parents in a desperate attempt to free him and his captured kin from an iron cage. Grief honed Pelagios like a sword. Over the course of decades, he learned to build waves big enough to drown entire fleets, but revenge did not satisfy him. No matter how many pirates fell to his hand, Pelagios still felt remorse for all that had been stolen from him and his kind. He heard word of gods of order seeking justice-minded heroes to join their righteous cause. Though he hardly trusted surface dwellers, he reached out to the arbiters and found them sympathetic to his cause. For the future of his people, Pelagios allowed his body to be turned into a vessel of divine might. Yet something of him was lost in this exchange. Like all arbiters, the Pelagios who set out on the path of justice is not the same man who lives to this day. He is empty somehow, more akin to a great statue than a living leader. Though Pelagios may have lost a part of himself, his fame extends far beyond the kingdoms of the sea. To sailors and pirates alike, Pelagios is now a force to be reckoned with, a guardian keen on enforcing his strict brand of law and order on all who would cross through his territory. There are tales of unstoppable fleets reduced to drifting ghost ships as punishment for their misdeeds. Pelagios' reputation alone has shaped shipping routes to some of Tyre's greatest coastal cities. I find it funny how he did all these beautiful things and he was so strong and has all these stories to tell, but he's like, I stand by changing those shipping routes. This is the safe direction. That direction, not safe, but I made this direction safe. There's no bad guys, there's no things. Send your goods that way. He's like, I am the Hudson's Bay. Kai, the Beasts Bane. Kai employs his massive crossbow to disguise his true mastery of tactics. I don't have him, but I heard that he sucks. The Beasts Bane. Wyvern spotted near the western bluffs, seeking a madman to deal with it. Competitive reward. See Merle at the Cat's Claw. Nailed to a message board. Oh, maybe he's gonna be kind of like Falsia. Oh my god, I thought she was an epic with how boring she was. Okay. Kind of give the same vibe. Let's see if they do the same stuff. Curious eyes and silent stares accompany him through every public space. Wary faces peer from clapboard windows as he strides through town squares seeking work, yet he pays them no mind. With trophies from his hunts adorning his black and crimson gear, no contract is too substantial for Kai, the Beast's Bane. Many have speculated as to his background, and nearly all have been well off the mark. Is he some plump lord's son off to prove himself worthy of inheritance? Or an adrenaline addict pressing towards an early grave? Perhaps it's merely the glint and clink of coin that drives him into what very often appears to be the jaws of death itself. In truth, Kai grew up a slum orphan and learned early to trust absolutely no one. He begged, stole, and scraped by, becoming more misanthropic as he grew into a tall, bedraggled youth. His only friend, an angry black stallion he managed to spring free from the stables of its abusive owners in one of his more daring escapades. They fell in sync, both angry with the world and in need of kindred company. After saving enough for a small crossbow, Kai guided his steed into the woods far away from the complications of man to live off of the land. By their second summer together, he could strike game from nearly a league away, growing strong from the meat while selling pelts to keep his horse fed, until something fed on his horse. After returning to his campsite one afternoon, the young thief-turned-hunter discovered chunks of his trusted steed scattered across the clearing, even in the trees. Guessing correctly that a dragon had done the horse in, Kai decided on the most logical course of action, tracking it down and putting a bolt straight through its eye. And that's exactly what he did. Fueled by stubborn fury, Kai followed his horse's blood trail through the woods to a cliffside cave overlooking the sea. He snuck into the dragon's lair and waited for the opportune moment. His bolt struck true and the serpent shuddered with a gargantuan death rattle. While skinning bits of the great beast and extracting various valuable trophies from its carcass, the thief-turned-hunter-turned-dragon slayer had but one thought. I could get used to this. He literally is like Falsia. They get paid and they get hired to hunt beasts and things. He had a little never-ending story action, and that just gave him more power. We love to see it. I now see that you are wearing a literal dragon's wing as a cape, which is metal. We did Hex already in the Infernal Blast faction. Sarak, the gruesome spear. The ruthless orc general whose violent nature has led him to slay friends and foes alike. He throws spears with unerring accuracy. Okay, so it just said accurate accuracy. The gruesome spear. Surely he doesn't intend on throwing that. Last words of the Masuian crossbow commander. Like many newly recruited orc soldiers, Sarak the gruesome spear began his career by serving as glorified bait. He and 100 other untested soldiers were sent to the front lines, armed only with crude spears they fashioned by hand. The recruits were tasked with drawing the enemy's attention at any cost. It was a bloodbath. As his comrades fell in droves around him, Sarak's despair drove him to adopt an unusual tactic. He picked up the spears of the fallen comrades and hurled them at his enemies. The first time his spear pierced flesh, Sarak was swept into a frenzy. He emerged triumphant. But the orc war chiefs frowned on Sarak's wanton violence. They called him the gruesome spear as an insult. Sarak's violent reputation grew rapidly, earning the ire of the war chiefs who were disturbed by his unruly attitude and cruel fighting style. They sent him on arduous missions, hoping he would be slain. But through ingenuity, insanity, or a mix of both, Sarak always survived. The more blood he shed, the more threatening he became. Eventually, the war chiefs attempted to kill Sarak themselves. They failed. Like so many enemies before them, the war chiefs fell victim to Sarak's spears. Their blood still stains his spears, a grisly reminder of what happens to those who oppose the gruesome spear. Having slain the war chief, Sarak became a general in the unified Orc Federation. But no matter how high he rises in rank, Sarak's favorite part of a fight will always be the look of surprise on the face of his enemy when his spear strikes true. He was always kind of a little freak, right? But they still call him the gruesome spear. But it was an insult. Like, they made up that name to make fun of him. That's like keeping the name that people called you in like elementary school that made you feel terrible about yourself, and then being like, yeah, that's just what people call me for the rest of my life. And we're ending the video today with Silas. Do you think that everything that happened to Vierna and everything that she was told by that guy in the woods is a lie? Do you think that Silas still loves her and actually got tricked, and she got tricked as well? Silas, the blind king, a sightless, exiled king, nevertheless devastating with a bow. Paired with Vierna, he's nigh unstoppable. Fall from grace. The crater formed upon his fall from grace goes deeper than any among us could fathom. Elven shaman of the Elder Woods. When the elves first settled in the Elder Woods, they discovered a cavern containing magical crystals used for augmenting their finely crafted armaments. Miners were conscripted and expeditions were fruitful for many years until they delved too deep, releasing an undead dragon from the eons of confinement. With the dragon ravaging their homeland, the elves looked to their leader Silas, now known as the Blind King, for answers. Silas and his beloved queen Vierna debated paths forward. Vierna was keen on protecting the elves and slaying the creature herself. After all, the powerful royal duo had already slain 2 dragons before. But Silas was adamant this was different. He was an undead dragon. Their spells and arms would be rendered useless against its might. Silas was distraught with fear of losing his queen in battle. Without Vierna's knowledge, Silas ventured alone into a damned quadrant of the forest realm to request aid from cursed, trapped spirits. His desperation to do anything to prevent losing his queen gained the attention of the powerful damned being. It proposed a deal. It would craft him a Death Eater weapon, one that could pierce through the veil of the undead at the cost of his eyes. He would never be able to lay sight upon his beloved Vierna again. Silas agreed, The king's eyes were plucked as sacrifice, and he was gifted a jagged bow from the branches of a foul tree. Now Silas's vision came from the cursed bow itself, and with it he secretly slew the undead dragon. But the spirit had tricked the king. Needing only one eye for the crafting of the bow, it used the other for its own liberation, and unleashed a blight upon the elder woods, destroying many of the sacred trees worshipped by the elves. Silas had saved his people from one terror and subjected them to another. His spirit decimated by what he'd done, Silas could not face his people, especially not Vierna. What would his beloved think of him? And how could she accept him with his ghastly new face? The blind king set off in search of the White Tower, hoping the mages there could reverse the spirit's curse and breathe life into the Elder Woods once more. Only after he fixed his mistakes could he bear to face his queen again. Okay, everyone, we're unpacking this right now because that evil spirit said, straight up, twisted Silas's words and told Vierna he doesn't care if he would ever see you again. But he just meant visually to save everyone. But he didn't tell her it was to save anyone, and all he showed her was the devastated forests and all the dead elves and the fact that Silas didn't want to see her ever again. But it wasn't that, it was just that he would give up his sight and he wouldn't be able to see her again. But it wasn't, oh my god. Now Silas needs to go to the White Tower. Vierna shows up to the White Tower with divorce papers, and Silas is like, because I'm ugly? Because I made a pact with an entity that I shouldn't have, and they killed a bunch of people. I didn't mean to. I killed the dragon for you. I did it in secret because I just wanted it gone and I didn't want you to be at risk of dying. Well, thank you so much for watching. This has been part 1 of the Star Piercers. No, they are in love and their marriage won't fail once he gets to talk to her. Which who knows when that will be, because he thinks he's disfigured and did her wrong, so I don't really know what's gonna happen with that, but at least we know, right? They're just fictional characters, doesn't matter if they know or not. Thank you so much for watching. I am Kate Rebel, this is Kate Rebel's Realm, and I will see you guys next time. I have such a bad migraine right now, but I'm trooping through for you guys. I hope you like the video. But I do it for you. Oh, you know I do it for you. Give me a hammer and a nail and I will build it. What's bedraggled? Limp, soggy, or dirty? Strict brand of law and order on... Dung dung. Perhaps it's merely the glint and clink of cloyne. What's a cloyne? War chiefs frowned on Sargak's wanton violence. Why did I say wonton? Wonton violence. I think that wonton soup might be the least violent of all the soups, also, may I add.